All right, so we're going to do some extra practice for exponents and order of operations. This is section 1.6. I'm going to write each expression using exponents. So we first identify what the base is. It looks like we have a whole bunch of 2's being multiplied together here, so the base is 2. How many 2's are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is 2 to the 7th power. Here we have 3 different bases. We have some -1s, some 4's, and a -7. So you can't write this all with one base. You're going to have to write 3 different bases. So that will be a base of -1, and there are 3 of them, so -1 to the 3rd power. 4 squared, because there are 2 4's being multiplied together, times -7. And you don't have to write the exponent of 1. When there is no exponent, it's implied to be 1. All right, what are the bases here? Well, they're kind of mixed up. It looks like we got some -2's, some 5's, an x, and a couple y's. So we have a few different bases here we can write. First, -2, and since it's a negative number being multiplied, we're going to use parentheses to make sure that negative actually gets in there as part of the exponent. And a 5, there are 3 5's being multiplied together. There is 1x, and there are 2 y's. So this becomes -2 squared 5 times 5 cubed times x times y squared. Here we have a couple more bases. Looks like some 3's and some variables, a, b, and c. So 3 cubed, a to the 4th power because there are 4 a's, b squared because there are 2 b's, and c because there's only one c. All right, expand each expression and find the value. So this means we read it as 4 cubed. There are 3 4's being multiplied together. So to expand it, 4 times 4 times 4, and then we multiply it together. What do we get? 16 times 4, which is 64. -3 to the 5th power. When we expand it, that's -3 times -3 times -3 times -3 times -3. We can multiply that out. Is it going to come out to be negative or positive? Again, remember, count the negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there's an odd number of negative signs, your product is negative. And then you can just multiply these. This is 9 times 9 times 3. Well, I know 9 times 9 is 81, so this is going to be 81 times 3, which is 243. -243. Okay, 0 to the 1 power. Any number to the 1 power is just that same number because it just means there is 1 0 being multiplied together. -1 to the 31 power. We had an example like this in the lesson. That means there's going to be -1's, 31 of them multiplied together. It says don't expand, just solve. So we don't have to write all these out. We just have to figure out what does this actually come out to be. -1 times -1 times -1 with 31 -1's multiplied together. Is that going to come out to be a negative or a positive? It's the first question. Well, there are going to be 31 negative signs. When there's an odd number of negative signs, your product comes out negative. And then 31 1's multiplied together, 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, still going to be 1. So this comes out to be -1. All right, 1.2 cubed. What does that mean? 1.2 times 1.2 times 1.2. All right, if you multiply those together, you get 1.728. Okay, here we have some fractions. -2/3 to the 4th power. That's negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3. First of all, it's going to come out positive or negative. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives, which means this is going to come out to be a positive number. And then to multiply these fractions, really easy. It's just top times top times top. Just multiply all these 2's across the top. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 makes 16. And across the bottom, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. If you multiply, this is 9. This is another 9. 2 9's multiplied together makes 81. So this is 16 over 81. Okay, on 6a, we have negative 5 squared. So the square is on the parentheses, so this negative 5, the negative is part of the base. Negative 5 times negative 5. Negative times negative makes positive 25. Over here, the square is only on the 5. With the absence of the parentheses, that negative does not be attached to the 5. It's not part of the base. So only the 5 is being squared. So this is 5 times 5. And this negative sign is popping on here in the front. So this turns out to be negative 25. All right, there's a little mistake here in your book with the directions. The directions here should not be solve. You cannot solve unless you have a variable. These directions are simplify, should be simplify. So we're going to simplify. This is using order of operations. So don't forget our little acronym. Grouping symbols first, then exponents. Multiply and divide are on the same step. We work them left to right, and then add or subtract, depending on how you like to look at those negative numbers. So it doesn't look like we have some parentheses here, but there aren't any operations in them. So we don't have to do anything with grouping symbols. We do have some exponents, though, and that would be here and here. And if you look, this is a really good example of the difference between the parentheses and the not parentheses with the negative sign. This is negative 2 cubed. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 here. But here, the negative is not part of the exponent. This is just 6 times 6. So when we simplify this, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, we get negative 8. We haven't done anything with the 5 yet. Going to bring down these. We haven't done anything with this negative 3 or this negative 4. Going to bring down this negative sign because it wasn't part of that exponent. And when we square the 6, we get 36. So this is what we have now. 5 times negative 8 minus 3 times negative 4 minus 36. So we've done exponents. Now we have to do multiply and divide, left to right. And here I see a multiply. Here I see another multiply. Remember, the multiply is when the numbers are right next to the parentheses with no symbols between them. So 5 times negative 8 is negative 40. Negative 3 times negative 4 makes positive 12. And then negative 36. And now we're down to the add and subtract. Or just the add if you like it that way. I have a negative 40 and a negative 36. These guys are both on the negative team, so they're going to add together to make negative 76. And I have a positive 12. And now they're going to fight because they're different signs. These 12 guys will cancel off 12 of these, but the negative guys had more. So we're going to end up with a negative. And 76 minus 12, 64. So let's look at B over here. There aren't any operations in these grouping symbols, and there aren't any exponents. So we're just going to start with multiply and divide left to right. And again, here's a divide, and here's a multiply. We have to work them left to right. So we're going to have to do this divide first, then this multiply. So 60 divided by 3 is 20, times negative 2 is negative 40. Then bringing down the negative 4 and the plus 10 that I haven't used. Now we just have add and subtract. Negative 40 and negative 4 are both negatives. They're going to come together to make negative 44. They're going to battle against the positive 10, and we're going to have negative 34 left. All right, number 8. We do have some grouping symbols this time. We have operations inside both these grouping symbols. So let's work inside this one first. 2 times 4 is 8. This negative sign is going to come down. Inside this parentheses, we have to do this exponent first before we do the subtract. So we're going to have a parentheses. 5 squared is 25. Then we're going to have 25 minus 9, which is 16. And then I'm going to bring everything that I haven't used straight down. So it looks like I have 80 divided by 8 minus 16. So that was the grouping symbols. The only exponent we had was inside the grouping symbols, so it's done now. We're up to multiply and divide, and here's the divide. 80 divided by 8 is 10. 10 minus 16, these are opposite signs. The negatives are going to win because they have more, so we're left with negative 6. Over here we have multiple grouping symbols. We have brackets with parentheses inside, and when you have this situation, you always start as far in as you can and you work outwards. So we're going to do what we can inside here first, and then we'll work inside these brackets, and then of course at the end we'll do what's on the outside of the brackets. So inside here we have an exponent and a subtraction. This square is only on the 2. It's not on this negative sign because the negative is not held in. So this is 2 squared, which is 4. The negative sign is there in front. So in this parentheses we have 3 minus 4, which is negative 1. Replace the brackets. We still have a negative 7 out here. This 5 is on the outside of this parentheses. And this 8 is right there inside the brackets. So it looks like what you have now here in the brackets is 8 minus 5, and this is a multiply between the 5 and these parentheses, which turned out to be negative 1. So we need to do this multiply first. So this is negative 5 times negative 1 makes positive 5, and the 8 is still there. So inside these brackets we end up with 8 plus 5, which is 13. On the outside of these brackets we have this negative sign, which again is right next to the bracket, so this 13 is going to end up being negative 13 minus 7, and they're the same signs, so they're going to group up together to make negative 20. On number 9, we have the fraction bar acting as a grouping symbol. So we need to simplify the numerator, simplify the denominator separately, and then do the division that the fraction bar is indicating. So we're going to bring the numerator down here where there's some white space. We have 2 times negative 1 minus 4 squared minus 6, and this is the numerator. So of course we're going to work inside these parentheses first. Negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5. Replace everything I haven't used. And then we need to do this exponent before we do this multiply. Exponents come first. So look, this negative is now held in. So the negative is part of the exponent. So this is negative 5 times negative 5. Negative 5 squared. Negative times negative makes positive. So this is going to be positive 25. This is multiply because it was right next to the parentheses. So 2 times 25 is 50. 50 minus 6 is 44. So it looks like the numerator turns out to be 44. And now we're going to do the denominator down here. So we have 8 minus absolute value of 2 minus 6. Absolute value bars are grouping symbols, so we have to work inside them first. So 2 minus 6 is negative 4. The absolute value of negative 4, how far is it from 0? 4 units. So this time we now have 8 minus 4, and you can see I replaced those absolute value bars with parentheses once I did the actual operation of absolute value. So 8 minus 4 is 4. So it looks like we end up with 44 divided by 4, which turns out to be, when we simplify it, 11. All right, on letter B, we have more absolute values here. These are absolute values around the negative 3, and then another set of absolute values around the 7 and the 5. These absolute values are right next to each other, which means that once we do the absolute value operation, they're going to be multiplied together. So there are no operations inside this one, so we're just going to take the absolute value first. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3, replaced with parentheses. This negative sign we haven't used yet, so it's coming down. Inside this absolute value bar, 7 minus 5 is 2. Let's erase. Not negative 2, positive 2. 7 minus 5 is 2. The absolute value of 2 is 2. So we now have this. This negative sign has not been used yet. This square only belongs on the 4. It doesn't belong with the negative. That's why the negative sign came straight down. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which makes 16. So this is what we end up with once we do the grouping symbols in the exponents. The absolute value of negative 3, this negative sign is still there. The absolute value of 7 minus 5, you see the multiplication is still here. Those two symbols right together. Minus 4 squared. So this is multiply, this is add. So we need to do this first before we add. We have to multiply. This is negative 3 times 2, which is negative 6, minus 6. They're both negatives, so they both go on the same side. They're going to clump up together to make negative 22. All right, down here at the bottom we have a simple word problem. What is the basketball point average if the points per game were in game 1, 14, in game 2, 18, in game 3, 20, 4, 28, in game 5, 21, in game 6, 32. So we're looking for an average. To find the average, we first sum or add all of our data. So we need to add 14, 18, 20, 28, 21, and 32. So if I have enough space, I'm going to make a column. I'm going to add 14, 18, 20, 28, 21, and 32. I'm going to add those. All right. When I add these, it comes out to be 23. When I add these, it comes out to be 13. So it looks like 133. So to find an average, that's the first step. First, you add your pieces of data, and then you take that sum, 133, and you divide it by how many pieces of data. And since there were 6 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I added 6 things together, so I'm going to divide. 6 goes into 13 twice. 2 times 6 is 12. Subtract. 6 goes into 13 again, twice. It looks like I can put a decimal on here maybe, and I can maybe carry this out to 1 decimal place. Looks like 22.1 because 6 goes into 10 one time. So that would be rounded because there are still remainders, and we could carry this decimal out, but it doesn't really matter if you do or not. 22.1. Of course, if you've got decimals that keep repeating or keep going out, you should follow directions that say round to the nearest tenth, or round to 1 decimal, or round to 2 decimals. These directions don't tell us how to round, so I think rounding to 1 decimal is good.